Recently, one of my female followers sent me a link to an article in Teen Vogue magazine which her son had read, and she wanted to know what my thoughts are on what was said in the article. She told me how after her son had read it, he came to her saying he felt a little bit depressed and was really struggling to come to terms with what was said in the article, which in a nutshell was that he should somehow feel bad about himself because he happened to be a male. And we had a terrific conversation about it, and I thought I'd share some of the thoughts that I shared with her with all of you because it truly does illustrate just what we as men are up against in today's society. Because as we'll show in the article, the mindset on display is one that wants to push the feminist agenda. The agenda that men, all men, are inherently bad, and anyone who dares to point that out or dares to speak out against it is themselves inherently bad. My name is Dan, and this is Men Need to Be Heard, the channel dedicated to raising awareness on the issues that men and boys face in today's modern society. And the article in question, which, as I said, comes from Teen Vogue, is entitled How These Men Left the Manosphere and Why Some May Never. And it claims to attempt to shed light on the experiences of individuals involved in online communities, collectively known as the manosphere. The true agenda, however, as we will show, is to dismantle those communities in order to deny men the opportunity to come together and support one another, lest they take away from the issues of women. And while the piece aims to address concerns about misogynistic and racist ideologies, it unfortunately employs broad generalizations that are nothing short of toxic and counterproductive. The article itself is proof of just how feminists take their toxicity, their hatred of men, and project it onto men, all to try and silence men and deny them any caring, compassion, or even acknowledgement on the issues that they face. And it's why they try to dehumanize men by lumping them into categories and applying labels such as the manosphere or being red-pilled to them. And then, of course, assigning negative connotations to those labels. Honestly, it's a well-worn tactic that's been used by those looking to promote evil, where they paint those they don't like as lesser in order to justify their hatred and mistreatment of them. And this isn't anything new. It's taken straight out of the blueprint of history. The very same blueprints, I might add, used in Germany, China, and Russia, just to name a few, less than 100 years ago. And we all know what happened with those countries and the communities they targeted, don't we? Which is why it is so clear to me that the author's goal by writing this article, and that of feminism in general, is to paint men with a single brush. It's why they create terms like the manosphere and then, as I said, assign negative thoughts, terms, and feelings towards them and those within. And by painting the entire manosphere with that single broad brush, the article and others like it seek to dehumanize men, to dismiss their very real issues and push them aside, all in favor of their agenda of hate. And before I go further, interestingly, while they've been doing this for 6 decades now, things are starting to change. Because by othering men, by telling them they don't matter and that their issues, their struggles are completely irrelevant, they're in effect alienating men who seek and deserve genuine support. And it's actually leading to the creation of the very thing they claim to be fighting, which in the end not only perpetuates a narrative that is detrimental to men, but to women as well. But let's get back to the article, which introduces readers to individuals like Maisie and her then-boyfriend Danny. It strives to illustrate how young men can become entrenched in harmful ideologies, and it goes into great detail to paint Danny as inhuman and a risk, not just to Maisie, but all women. And the fact of the matter is, we don't even know if Danny even exists. He simply could be a fantasy, a fictional character created to foster the author's belief. And even if he does exist, it's clear the author never spoke to him. She simply accepted Maisie's version as truth, as gospel, never questioning its veracity or truth, something an actual journalist would do. And while these personal anecdotes are compelling, they don't actually represent the entirety of the manosphere or the diverse experiences of its participants. Feminist authors like the author of this article, one Fortessa Latifi, will comb through dozens, if not hundreds of stories to find that one that fits the narrative and agenda that they want to push. And if they can't find one, they'll often stoop to creating one of their own. Then they'll focus solely on these extreme cases and present them as the norm to discredit the entire movement. It's why, for example, she chooses in the article to focus on Andrew Tate, as if no one else exists in the manosphere, and assigns his beliefs, his thoughts to all men, both in and out of the so-called manosphere, even though those of us who are overwhelmingly in the majority within the manosphere and who speak out on behalf of men, make it very clear that Tate doesn't speak for them, or indeed most men. Nowhere in her article does she point out that most men reject the values espoused by Mr. Tate or others like him. No, instead, all men are lumped together as one, as evil. And she even goes so far as to introduce a so-called expert, one Cynthia Miller Idris, herself a radical extreme feminist who espouses anti-male viewpoints and has done so for many years, all to lend credibility to her arguments and the article. Curiously, though, the author didn't take the time to speak to anyone who may have disagreed with her, lest, of course, they dispute her, let's call them, findings. Can we say confirmation bias, anyone? And as this piece illustrates, feminists, like the author, completely neglect the nuanced reasons why men might seek out these communities, such as the desire for camaraderie, support, or discussions on the issues that men face. In fact, I'd argue so blinded are they by their hate, they can't even consider anything that goes against it to be worthy of consideration. So ingrained is that mindset that they even try to paint men seeking out help or support in a bad way, in hopes they'll stop doing so. And it's why they go to great lengths, like writing articles such as this, which say that men seeking support are being unmanly or toxic or even dangerous, all in hopes they'll stay silent and go away, lest their issues become acknowledged or even addressed, lest feminism's agenda of hate and bigotry be called into question. The goal of this author and many others like her is to continue that one-sided paradigm that feminism has lived by for 60 years now. The extremist paradigm that, at its core, is a zero-sum game. A game that believes that any focus, support, or attention paid to men must take away from that paid to women. Thus, they cannot allow or acknowledge men or their issues in any way, because to do so in their mind takes away from having 100% of the focus and attention that they believe should be placed on women's issues and only women's issues. In short, they're proving they don't believe in equality in any way, shape, or form. It's women who matter, not men, a belief which in the end not only hurts men, but hurts women. Because by predominantly highlighting negative aspects, this article and others like it risks further alienating men who are already feeling marginalized, who are already walking away from women and walking away from society as a whole. It also, by the way, alienates many women, especially those who actually care about men. You know, the ones who care about their sons, their husbands, their fathers, and so on. The feminist approach has and continues to push individuals further into echo chambers where their feelings of disenfranchisement are validated, rather than encouraging open dialogue and understanding. Put another way, These women, these feminists, have made it abundantly clear they aren't willing to listen to men and their issues, or even show the slightest bit of caring about them. It's about them and only them, to the point, I might add, they've even labeled men as having issues, or the women who care about them to be filled with toxic masculinity. And that's only fueling the gender divide and creating the very toxicity in men they're claiming they want to fight. The very toxicity towards men they themselves have tried to spread to other women for decades now. And it's led to men asking, why should we care in the least about women and their issues when they've cared nothing for ours? Moreover, labeling vast online communities as inherently toxic without even spending a single moment speaking to the members within, let alone acknowledging their complexities, only stifles opportunities for constructive conversation about gender dynamics and the issues that both men and women face, which, to be blunt, is exactly their goal. You see, they don't want to have actual real discussion because they know that it will expose them for who they are. And they are the real problem. The narrative presented not only affects men, but also has serious and dire implications for women. Very negative ones at that. By framing the manosphere solely as a breeding ground for misogyny, it dismisses men, demeans them, and others them. It is, in fact, pure, unadulterated misandry, though they'll never admit it. Which is why they also work so hard to deny there is such a thing as misandry, lest that bigotry and hatred be discovered. It's also why they attack their fellow women who refuse to follow their agenda, who are themselves part of the so-called manosphere. It's why they label them with terms like pick me or tell them that they're just full of internalized misogyny. And it's why they believe those women are misled, unintelligent, and a host of other labels that they hurl at women, which in and of itself is the very misogyny they claim to be against. This article, which is in a teen magazine read by impressionable young minds, overlooks the potential for meaningful discussion about masculinity and the challenges that men face. The obvious goal is to get young women and men to hate masculinity, to see it as nothing but in a negative light. And its other goal is to ensure that men and boys are silenced so that they don't have an outlet for their issues, so that they will have no one to speak for them. And it even tries to claim that boys struggling should feel bad about themselves for even having those struggles because, well, it takes away from those of women. Imagine the evil mindset you have to have that your goal is to get those who are struggling to punish themselves further for just having those struggles. Yet here it is in black and white. And as I said, in the end, that ends up harming women far more than it helps them. This deliberate omission hinders communication between men and women, hinders progress towards mutual understanding and respect between the genders. Furthermore, by not addressing the systemic issues that give rise to such communities, the piece misses an opportunity to foster empathy and collaborative solutions. It denies men and women the ability, dare I say, even the right to come together. And again, as I said earlier, it leads to men not caring about women and their issues, just as women haven't cared about men's for decades now. And I ask, how does that benefit anyone? While it is essential to address and condemn misogynistic ideologies, it's equally important to address and condemn misandrist ones, such as that seen in this article. Those who espouse this type of bigotry, who try to spread it, need to be called out and exposed for who they are. And until we do, until we approach the topics and issues that both women and men face with nuance, with mutual caring and concern, the divide between men and women will only continue to grow, not get smaller. and recognizing the legitimate concerns and struggles that lead individuals to seek out help and support within the so-called manosphere can pave the way for more effective interventions, not just for men, but for women as well. Only by fostering inclusive discussions, ones that validate the experiences of both genders, can we as a society work towards dismantling harmful ideologies, such as that of feminism, without alienating those it aims to help. In conclusion, to Miss Latifi and Teen Vogue, I say this: we see you for who you are. We see the agenda you're trying to push, and we reject it. We reject it as men, we reject it as women who care about men, and we reject it for the bigotry towards men that it clearly is. While Teen Vogue's article brings attention to a pressing issue in its own way, its approach only perpetuates division rather than promote understanding. Sadly, those who do perpetuate it aren't going to change. They are who they are, and frankly, they're incapable of change, incapable of even having dialogue about change. Which is why it's incumbent on the rest of us to have a more balanced exploration, one that acknowledges the complexities of the so-called manosphere and the individuals within it, which would in the end far better serve the goal of fostering healthy, inclusive conversations about gender and society. So what do you think? Should we call out articles like this? Should we be fostering an inclusive dialogue that addresses the issues of both women and men? Should we be promoting equality or continue the zero-sum focus on women's issues that has been the norm for many decades now? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video and learned something from it, please consider sharing it with others so they too can benefit from it. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you'll be made aware of future videos on the issues men and boys face in today's modern society.